because...
Okay, so welcome everyone for this third series of Fast for Climate Digital Solutions for MRV. Today we have the presentation from Andrea of UCSC. He's going to present the dMRV, called Remote C. Andrea, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Riccardo. Let me find probably... I don't know what you can see. What you can see is not the right one. Let me check because I have something open, not this one, probably this one. Just a second, because I'm not used of Zoom, but other. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, and full screen.
Full screen, perfect. So, thanks everybody. I will take 20 minutes because I want to introduce the overall digital MRV tool that great number of components are developed and validated within Funds for Climate. But as you can see, within a 3 years project, we cannot develop all the digital tool to fully, be compliant with the certification bodies for insetting or offsetting. So we just took the time to develop and further validate some of the components of the digital monitoring reporting verification tool that we mostly develop as UCSC for Northern Italian agriculture and Funds for Climate, but we also leverage some tools developed in other projects that we will be embedded in a digital platform probably afterwards, after the end of the project. So we start from always this, from this sentence that I like it a lot. It's from an American writer that says you cannot manage what you do not measure. In the terms of carbon removals, monetization, it's better to say you cannot monetize what you do not measure. And you see here a soil maps, super critical component, the soil sampling and measuring of the carbon removal. So we need to be scalable, accurate, but especially flexible in our approaches for making operational the carbon removals. What does it mean to be operational in terms of, producing number to monitor, report, and quantify carbon removals? I literally take the Article 4 formula of the CRCF EU regulation, which is that says which is a benefit in terms of net temporary carbon removals. It's not only about be able to accurately estimate the carbon removal of some plots that are adopting carbon farming, but against a baseline. So this is our reference, and in our approach, baseline is not always the one standardized provided by the EU, but also is the one that we developed for our regions, okay? So it's not always about, monitoring something happening on the right plot. You see here the CO2 removals thanks to the cover crops in the bottom right picture, but also about making a difference between these carbon removals, a ton of CO2 sequestered in this number of hectares, versus the one that I would have lost or gained if I did not apply these practices. This is the baseline, our reference. And I skip the second, but I enter on this carbon credit type of issues because these are the two main types of greenhouse gases accounting. And these are very relevant for us because my platform, if I have a platform developed for carbon credits in terms of compensation or contribution credits, you see on the right, it's not just about emission reduction or storage removals against a baseline. It's the ability also to provide numbers to support the decarbonization of an agro-food industry that must report their scope 3 emissions. And this is all the emissions of the fields where, I don't know, a kind of raw material is purchased by the industry. And this is the ton of CO2 emitted or sequestered per tons or per certain number of tons of products delivered to the agro-food industry. And this is well represented here. This is the focus. Carbon farming project, carbon removal project is just a part of the scope 3. But our platform, our digital tool, should, or better, must provide numbers for this type of reporting in terms of emission, reduction, or storage. And when we do adjusted scope 3 inventory, is because thanks to our carbon farming program, we can increase or decrease emission, or we can increase of a certain amount the removals. And we have to provide numbers to adjust the agro-food industry scope 3 reporting in terms of official reporting in this way. So, as I told you, this is the background where we are working on, and the challenge for us was since the beginning, the sampling and measuring carbon removals. This is just an example where that is very relevant for us because we deal with it every day when we have to sample and measure carbon removals. Let's take this 10 hectares field. We divide it into a certain number of 0.3 hectare cell grids, and we enter randomly, and we take 10 samples randomly. And this is the soil organic carbon concentration variation, 10 samples per cell, from 1.42 to 1.61. And we do the same for other cells. That's the variability of soil carbon concentration in a field, at least for our region, of course. And this is the real accurate soil organic carbon stock maps. Look, these fields has an average of 55 tons of carbon with a variation of 4 tons as a standard deviation. But which is the potential technical, economically feasible carbon sequestration rate for the practice that we can adopt within our crop rotation is much lower, 0.3 up to 1 tons of carbon per hectare per year that can be sequestered. Let's multiply by 5 years. Is always the carbon sequestration potential is always below the real spatial variability of soil organic carbon stock. And that's also, they should always tell us where we have to improve our accuracy. Okay, so we can skip. So our remote C, that's our digital monitoring, reporting and verification tools, is the one that use the hybrid approach. So we don't want to use the measure and remeasure approach, so taking sample at the beginning and retaking a certain huge number of samples at the end. So we want to use the hybrid approach by combining sampling and modeling. And the possibility was with or without remote sensing or proximal sensing assimilation. We took a flexible approach, is an hybrid approach, sampling plus modeling for sure, and with a remote sensing assimilation, and if it's cost effective, also with proximal sensing assimilation. I want also to remember that a monitoring, reporting, verification tool should be compliant with approaches provided by international standards, and a model that we select must be calibrated, must be validated, and within the carbon farming product must be potentially cross-validated. And we need to be able to provide the model error estimate to propagate uncertainty on the final carbon certificates that we want to issue and be verified. That's why at the end, the hybrid approach should be able to measure and estimate the program impact in terms of number of CO2 removed or CO2 emissions avoided, and also provide the tools to detect, to identify sampling point for the ground truthing final verification. And last but not least, the tool also must be able to support the carbon farming adoption to provide an ex-ante simulation where we do simulate ex-ante before the start of the project the potential number of credits that can be generated, comparing the project line, the carbon farming practice that can be adopted, versus the baseline. Last few words, and then I will enter directly on the technicalities of the tools. To monetize carbon removals, we have to be honest. Somehow, when we have, for example, a practice like a cover crops adoption in croplands in, I don't know, European agricultural soils, this is the normal carbon sequestration potential per year. But what does it mean? Let's remember the field that we saw before. We had an average of 55 tons of stored of carbon per hectare. What does it mean if we have this type of error on measuring the time at the time zero, the sock stock, that if we adopt in this field the cover crops in 5 years, we store 1.5 tons. But look at the margin of errors of these estimates if our MRV approach is not accurate enough. The lower, at the end, margin error bands, and the higher error bands at the beginning, They match and they fall within the same range. So we cannot say that we have significantly sequestered 1.5 tons of carbon. That's why to monetize carbon removal, we need to work within margin of error with what? With more digital and spatially explicit technologies. What does it mean for us? Smart sampling protocol, proximal soil sensor, calibrated and validated models outside the data from the project, and remote sensing product assimilation. But it's not enough. It's not enough because the monetization is low. To monetize much more per farm, per year, per hectare, whatever is the unit, we also need more carbon farming done right. So more real practices adopted at farm level that really sequester a lot of carbon. And that's the only way, keeping in mind that we have also to be cost effective in monitoring and reporting and verification, and also in adopting these practices. That's the only way. You see here 1 ton of carbon per hectare per year. We for sure be able to prove that we have sequestered these 5 tons. And these 5 tons led also to a higher net income for the farmer. And last but not least, and then I will enter on the remote sea approach, we cannot rely on standardized European-based baseline because we have the risk that we cannot catch the real baseline for the standardized practices. We can really have a lot of farmers that are undercredited and a lot of farmers that are overcredited. So we need more dynamic, regional, accurate baseline. Because with this baseline, ex-ante, we can really say you are going to sequester 4 tons if you adopt the carbon farming practices. And then dynamically, during the project time, when we start at 24, we can really able to redo a dynamic baseline versus the ex post evaluation of the carbon farming practices. And finally, we are at the remote sea. We didn't want since the beginning to work, and that's what I normally present when I want to show the potentiality of our approach. We want to tackle the challenge of data input and output spatialization. Because to reduce the error propagation, to work within the so-called margin of error, we need to spatialize much more. We need to leverage all the spatial input data in a cost-effective way. But to monetize the carbon removal, we need absolutely, if we are talking about thousands of hectares, to be much more spatialized. And that's the kind of Mona Lisa picture that we would like to have in terms of exploring the carbon removal potential. Because reality is this one. This is a real example of a carbon farming program that we are starting in our region. Here we are in the Piacenza region. We are talking about 8 farms, more than 1,000 hectares, 5 crops into rotation, more than 100 fields. So we cannot have a simple exercise of simulating the carbon removal in one field. It doesn't work. Because technically speaking, we are talking about 9 soil types, 5 textural classes, and a soil organic carbon stock as initial values that range from 30 to 82. Soil type, textural class, and initial stock are 3 super important variables that determine the final carbon sequestration potential. So we need to spatialize all the input data to simulate in an accurate, flexible, and scalable way the carbon removals. So for doing this, we have picked up from the latest, more advanced remote sensing, proximal sensing, and artificial intelligence technologies to equip a platform where involved are the, and let me scroll all the components of the platform. Involved are the components that we have improved thanks to the Farms for Climate. So the farm enrollment is basically the automatization, the assimilation of the field boundaries and the declare crops, so the land parcel information system. The ex-ante assessment is the standardized baseline, thanks to the simulation of remote sensing products. And thanks also to the work of Irena, we have developed digital tools for the proximal soil sensing stock accounting for initialization of the soil carbon models. And we have also started in the last month to equip our remote sea approach of some remote sensing products for monitoring and practice verification. So, first component of the baseline is because in the standardized baseline, we do an ensemble modeling of estimates of carbon removal deriving from direct soil organic carbon stock retrieval from remote sensing and carbon removal estimate from a modeling approach. The remote sensing retrieval is based on a machine learning based model that we have calibrated and trained over 40,000 samples in our region, Emilia-Romagna region. You see on the top left the sampling point. And we are using all the satellites that are available. And we apply the machine learning model to predict sock stock on the bare soil. So basically, we do a soil masking using different Sentinel-2 bands, and we create a synthetic bare soil index where to apply our prediction models. The dynamic predictors are the satellite imageries, and static predictors are terrain attributes and other soil properties that are available at higher resolution in Emilia-Romagna region. That's an example of the maps that we can create, for example, for all the bare soil of Piacenza. And that's the performance in the green box of our model. What is interesting that we can apply to each pixel over space and time of a region, and we can attribute the carbon removal, so the baseline, so the delta SOC change, to a crop rotation, because we attribute to each land parcel also the crop that has been cultivated. So we do a kind of generalized additive model exercise, and thanks to the partial effect analysis, we can rebuild and assign to each crop rotation the real delta SOC. That's the delta SOC estimated over the last 10 years for each pixel of the Emilia-Romagna region for the different main crop rotation that we have in our region. And that's one of the most important first information for our baseline. And that's an example of the trends of the SOC stock over the last 10 years. That's the first baseline. Then we introduce another source of carbon removal estimate thanks to the modeling. The modeling that we use is an approach similar to the one of JRC. We use the land parcel information data on the left. We also run the simulation per agroecological zone at different NUTS level, NUTS 1 level and NUTS 2 level, basically a pedoclimatic and cropland type strata, homogeneous zone, where we run a model. ROTC is a super famous model, and we are using a different version of the ROTC, the one calibrated for the exogenous organic matter, basically compost, digestate, also crop residues. We have developed within Farms for Climate a package called Remote C, that is a specialized version of the ROTC model that is assimilating remote sensing products. Basically, for the moment, is not direct assimilation. With this package, you can upload the time series vegetation index with which we can identify for each crop and parcel the start of the season and the end of the season and the day of residues incorporation. And thanks to this date, phenologic data, we create and we derive the monthly C factor for the ROTC model. And within the growing season, we estimate, thanks to the light use efficiency model, is a crop model, the biomass and the yield using also ERA5 meteorological data. We translate the plant biomass and yield into carbon inputs of roots, exudate, and residues. We use statistics for the standardized management of crop residues. And we also use the statistics for the organic amendments. Altogether, plus a modified tillage rate modifier that we have included in the ROTC, we can apply this standardized baseline to our territory. Basically, what we do a spin-up, warm-up process using the historical past land use that we have available for our region. We combine the remote sensing dynamic map, as I told you, and the Emilia-Romagna digital soil maps together to initialize the soil carbon model. We apply the crop classification history to the agroecological zone. And we, as you see here, we identify the main crop rotation in terms of length and number of crops into rotation. We take from a database that we have the yield and biomass of each crops into rotation over the past 5 years. And we can train a machine learning model to couple the yield and the method. Why the method? Because we don't want to use the past 5 years metadata, but we want to create, thanks to these method generators, really the different type of climate that we can have in the future, not just over the past 5 years. And we can run using the stock initialize and the yield data, so the carbon input data and the statistic for residues organic amendment. We can run single or blended baseline for the different type of crop rotation, like the first one, wheat and tomato, or the second one, wheat, maize, and tomato, or wheat, legume, or tomato. And we can run also the blended baseline, that is basically an average of the main 3 standardized crop rotation over a certain homogeneous zone. That's an example for Piacenza province. We have the 2 main crop rotation of Piacenza, wheat and tomato on the top right, and just behind, just at the bottom, the wheat, maize, and tomato for the 3 main homogeneous zones. Basically are soil type differences. And these are the baseline over the past 5 years for the stock for these 3 ecological zones. And these are the distribution of baseline. And in terms of mean and standard deviation. Then we move into the next step. Okay, so we have the baseline that can be used for the ex-ante, but then we enroll fields and farmers that are gonna adopt on these fields for the next 3-5 years under a carbon farming program, a certain number of practices. So we do the ex-post assessment. So that's very similar to the one for baseline operational processing chain, same model, but then we can have the initial carbon stock that can be provided as a map, as a raster map, thanks to the proximal sensing, or simply discrete values for each field if we do a simple sampling campaign at the initial. Then we assimilate from the field notebooks of each farmer, so the farm's crop declared the type of crops. We identify from remote sensing the same information as before, start of the season and end of the season. We dynamically create the binary C factor for the rod C. We estimate plant and biomass. We estimate, thanks to this allometric function, the carbon input. We create the plant carbon input maps. We create the crop residues maps. We use from the PUA, is the Italian terms of field notebooks for the amount of organic amendment apply in terms of type, quantity, and timing by each farmer every year. We use the tillage rate modifier if it's conventional, minimal, or no tillage agriculture, and we do the simulation. But, okay, so for the initial carbon stock, instead we enter on another topic, because if we do not enter with a proximal soil sensor, I will show you later, we need to decide where to sample. And for doing this initialization, because we need to provide discrete values for each field where to run the simulation at farm or field level, we adopt the stratified systematic random sampling. We use pedoclimatic and crop rotation strata, and within this strata we used as covariates for our random sampling, the Sentinel-2 synthetic bare soil index covariates, and we decide where to sample. I don't want to bore you with the technicalities of the data collection processing of our remote sensing guided smart soil sampling, but if you are interested, we can discuss it later. But then I want to show some results of the work that we have done in the task 5.5, also in terms of the calibrating and developing proximal sensing based soil organic carbon stock accounting approach. We have used as proximal sensor the VERIS one, the iScan Pro, that is basically measuring the reflectance of the soil using red and infrared, the C sensor here in the picture, and using the electrical conductivity measured by this on-the-go sensor in the A and B disk of the sensor. For the moment, we are working mainly on the soil organic carbon stock. These are the properties that we have, for which we have built a machine learning-based prediction model. And we are gonna also work for total nitrogen and also available water capacity and equivalent soil mass, but that's the next step in the future. This is just some configuration of our proximal sensor that can be attached and mounted to different tractors or sowing machines. And the procedure, the mapping phase, we basically enter in the field, we take the readings, the AC VSNI readings, we analyze the readings, we apply the sampling, smart sampling to determine a minimum of 2 samples per field, but normally it's 3 samples per field. We do the analysis, we enter these measure values on our database, and we apply a quantile regression forest algorithm to predict the soil organic carbon stocks and also its related uncertainties. How is it built the model? In the digital tools, we use for each field the electrical conductivity, the infrared, the red, and the ratio. So these are the readings taken from the proximal sensor, but that was not enough. Rihanna worked a lot on this. We are also going to submit a paper on this on a peer-reviewed journal, but we proved that is not enough to be accurate and scalable. So we equip the prediction model also using other covariates. In our case, for sock concentration, in percentage, we use the B2 and the B12 Sentinel-2 bands, but also we use also ancillary variables like the estimate soil organic carbon from Emilia-Romagna region and the soil type maps. So altogether, we use these covariates and we built a model. That's, for example, it's in Italian. An example, you see here the scatter plot of the root mean square error of these validation points. So observed stock and predicted with the proximal sensor integrating remote sensing information. And these are the number here on the right. You see here the within and outside, what it means. Observation number, we have more than 20 independent validation fields, and the points is the observed. So we take some sample to verify ground fruit measurements, the observed sock stock mean. The intervals are the confident intervals, 90% confident intervals. And if 1 point is orange, it means it's outside. So in only one case over 22, we were not able to catch the real observed mean. So for the moment, we are satisfied enough to say that our site-specific calibration and our builded model, calibrated and builded model, is quite accurate. Then we needed also other remote sensing big data contribution in our approach, digital MRV approach. So in Farms for Climate, we work not on tillage practice on field boundary detection of cover crop detection. This is being done in other projects, but in Farms for Climate, we improve our light use efficiency model. It's our crop model fed by remote sensing data that we are using at scale to detect and estimate at a 10-meter resolution the crop biomass and the crop yield. First things that we have to do is to say to the model where to start the simulation and where to end the simulation. So we basically use a Copernicus products, biophysical product, the leaf area index, and thanks to a simple algorithm, we detect the start of the season. You see here, the wheat, for example, here we have in the red boxes, and that's an highlight, the start of the season and the end of the season. So these are the two key dates for our light use efficiency model to start to simulate the crop biomass. Or we can do the same for cover crops. This is an algorithm that you see here on the right. On this field, we have cover crops grown and not on the left side. Okay, so the light use efficiency model is a very simplified modeling solution to estimate from remote sensing above ground biomass. This is the simple formula that we use to estimate above ground biomass. So we start from the assumption that the net primary productivity is basically the product of the absorbed photosynthetically active radiation, APAR, and the actual light use efficiency. This defines the light use efficiency model as the efficiency of the photosystem to use absorbed light to fix carbon. So here the concept is over a growing season, we have a linear relationship between the accumulated interceptor PAR and is linearly related, as I said, with above ground dry weight. So if we are able to estimate from remote sensing the fraction of photosynthetically active radiation and with simple meteorological data, the actual light use efficiency of the crop, the work is done. So basically, what we do, we have developed our own modified light use efficiency air packages where we upload the Sentinel-2 images for the growing season that we have detected before, and we apply this light use efficiency model. And we have an estimation of the accumulated above ground dry biomass over the growing season. We use the harvest index of the grains crop, we use the normal percent of moisture, and we get the harvestable yield for each plot. Again, I don't want to enter on the technicalities of the assimilation and modeling framework. These are all the components where we take the meteorological data, the Sentinel-2 data, and so on. But just to show you, I want to show you some example of a estimation of the carbon input, because we estimate biomass and yields at 10 meter resolution. You see here two fields. On the right, we have the carbon farming plots, and on the left, the baseline plots. You see here in red, we do not have biomass and then carbon input because we didn't have cover crops. So we can really monitor and estimate the carbon input for each pixel over the entire crop rotation. So this we have already seen, sorry, if I paste it again. And then we apply just some example of some of the farms that we have monitored in Farms for Climate. These are 5 farms where we add the control plots, the baseline plots, and the carbon farming plots. These are the results of the application of a ROT-C version, calibrated version to these farms over the past 36 months. In blue, we have the baseline predicted, and with the blue colors, and with the orange color, the carbon farming plots predicted and observed. So we have the points are the observed points, the time series stock monitoring the field, and the predicted one. You see here, basically, that we were able to get a nice predicted trends of stock. So then the carbon removals, the difference. And also the root mean square error of the baseline plots and the carbon farming program plots are very acceptable, because this is the root mean square error in terms of delta SOC. It's not about measuring SOC stock at month 28, but is about be able to detect a delta SOC difference, time month 36 minus time 0. So that's the delta SOC, so the carbon remove. Or simply, we were also passing all the uncertainty and accuracy tests, for example, using the formula of the Verra protocol, where it says that our model bias must be always lower than the pooled mean uncertainty variance of the entire carbon farming program. So you see here on the bottom right that we were always below. Or simply, the scatter plots of the observed delta shock y-axis, and in the x-axis, and the y-axis the predicted delta shock. That's not normal in a, let's say, in a peer review paper, but because most of the modelers, they use other ways to show their goodness. Normally, they do not use the delta shock, just the time series shock stock. But we also wanted to show here on the right the same uncertainty confidence intervals test. So in all the 5 farms, both for carbon farming, the blue plots or the orange plot, the baseline, our model was able to catch most of the times, so more than 90% of the studies, we were within the confidence intervals with our measurements, ground truth measurements for final verification. So to summarize, the tools using the proximal sensing, assimilated remote sensing products to estimate biomass, and using a calibrated ROTC model, we were able to generate a certain number of credits. Of course, it's just hypothetical because it's not a real carbon farming. We started 3 years ago on these 15 hectares in these 5 farms. I forgot to mention that in another project, we also calculated the emissions using the Cool Farm tool to calculate all the emission linked to the use of fuels, use of energy for irrigation, the direct and indirect emissions from fertilizers, from the agrochemical, from the crop residues. So these are, for example, the sum of the emissions over these 15 hectares for the baseline, and the reduction of 4% of emission in the carbon farming fields. But what was interesting, we apply the remote sea approach thanks to the work done in the Farms for Climate project. We were able, these are just data that was produced a few days ago because, you know, it took 3 years to collect all of this data and run the models. So these are the verified carbon removal estimate for baseline and for the carbon farming plots. You see the big difference is the amount of carbon removed as stable soil carbon, net stable soil carbon. What does it mean? It means that we were able to remove 7 tons per carbon per hectare in these 3 years. So it means on average an annual sequestration rate of 0.67. The root mean square error of the carbon removal estimates is 0.8, and the total number of CO2 removed, for example, would have been 330 tons of CO2 removed with a total uncertainty, and by total I mean sampling and modeling uncertainty, was lower than 10% because we were around 18 tons of CO2 as total uncertainty of the entire project. That led potentially to the generation of 17 certified units as net temporary carbon removal units in 3 years. That is on average a super interesting number of around 6 number of certificates per hectare per year that can be potentially certified if we would have used, for example, the Verra VM 0042 protocols. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Andrea. That was very impressive, at least for me. I don't know if I surely haven't seen anything so advanced as it. I don't know if you did, but it's quite impressive. As I normally did in the past series, I first give the floors to the audience before I come with my questions, okay? Okay, it seems no one has a question, so I have many. I mean, exploratory
I have
questions.
just a question for Andrea.
Okay,
yes, I have two.
Okay, sorry, I didn't make myself so clear. So yes, please tell.
Andrea, yes, my question is related to the light use efficiency model.
Yeah.
Just I want to ask you if it is possible to use this model for every crops or just for tomato in your case. And I did not understand about the lie. The lie was measured or was just a prevision, the leaf area index?
Ok, thanks, Theo. Allora,
Sure.
basically, the light use efficiency model can be potentially applied to each crops because the light use efficiency model history comes from the forest ecosystems, okay? Because there we have also this linear relationship between the F bar and the MPP, okay? So can be potentially done everywhere. Of course, we took this simplified light use efficiency model. We calibrated for our crops, not just tomato, but maize, cover crops, soybean, mostly cereals crops. And we have validated for the F bar. So basically, the question is, and I'm gonna answer you the second question of the light. From the remote sensing, we use a very simple NDVI F-bar linear relationship. Okay, so we can, when we have clear Sentinel-2 data, we derive NDVI simply, and we apply this relationship, NDVI F-bar. Of course, you need to do the gap filling because over a season, you don't have every 3-7 days a clear F-bar estimate. So we do a gap filling with a generalized additive model. We create a daily F-bar series. We download meteo data to calculate the par, to calculate the stressors, because we have the downscale regulation of the stressor, the soil humidity stressor, all calculated from meteo data. And we calculate simply the accumulated above ground dry biomass. So we do not estimate light, but we use the par. Photosynthetic active radiation can be easily estimated from a meteo station, from the whatever meteo data station. And you can really do simple tests also on your crops. Of course, you have to validate. To validate for the F-bar and for the biomass estimate. So we enter in the field, we took the elementary sampling units, so 20 by 20 pixel. We took 4 subsample of 1 meter square, and we validated against the biomass and then the yield, of course. Then a kind of trial that we are doing is not only to validate the intraplot, so very specific ESU estimates, so 20 by 20 pixel, but also to validate the commercial yield and the national statistics. So because we want to see if it's scalable from the intraplot to the commercial plot to the regional scale, the light use efficiency model. But basically, it's a very simple approach. So, I mean, if you Google light use efficiency model and DVI relationship, I mean, it's a linear relationship, nothing special. Of course, in your system where you have trees, you have to somehow clean the Sentinel-2 data, of course.
Yeah. Sometimes you have also net, you know, the net.
That's why to me, it's not 100% applicable.
No. Okay. Thank you very much, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Claudia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Andrea. Now listen me, yep.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you.
Please go.
Thank you for your presentation. I have some questions. The last one, that when you said that you have the relationships between NDVI, maybe you don't do or did relations with GNDVI, or was only with NDVI? Because with GNDVI, we can close more with, for example, chlorophyll.
Yes, but it did not improve a lot, honestly. We use different vegetational index, the heavy, and many other. We try to do a multivariate relationship, but at the end, for our accuracy needed, because you don't have to remember that we have always to find a trade-off between the accuracy and the scalability. Okay, for the moment, NDVI, we create our own local NDVI FPAR relationship. Otherwise, we should have used the general one that is applied globally. Instead of moving to the GNDVI or other indexes, I would suggest you, if you need to use this type of model, to create your own local NDVI FPAR relationship. Because basically, in our conditions, the tillering phase of wheat is completely different. We go saturated with NDVI very easily. So we had to rebuild somehow the relationship. Of course, GNDVI can improve a bit, but in reality, what you really have to do is not only the local, let's say, models but really the Bayesian calibration for the parameters. I didn't mention, but at the end, all this type of model needs to be Bayesian calibrated. And it's very tough and it's really long process to do it.
Yes, yes. And another question is, if you did this for tomato crop, how did you discriminate the part of the soil?
Basically, we download all the Sentinel-2 data, basically, no, not the Sentinel-2, but the leaf area index products from Copernicus. We identify the start and end of the season of that field for that crop, and then we apply the light use efficiency model only on the growing season.
Okay, yeah, you showed that, but I didn't understand.
Because this helps a lot, because otherwise you start running from January where you have a lot of soil interference.
Yes, the interference, yeah. And maybe have you tried using any satellite with closer spectral resolution like Planet, maybe?
Yes, but it's not operational. I mean, I want to be operational. I mean, if I need to apply to 1,000 hectares the model, it means that I have to manually download all the Planet.
Yeah.
So that is just, I mean, I know in the future with Prisma, with the Sentinel-4 satellite we launched by 2030, for sure, we will be much more accurate. But for the moment, I need to be scalable and cost effective, because if I need to charge to the farmers or to the agri-food industry the downloading of thousands of Planet 2 images, I mean, for the moment, I cannot tell you our cost for MRV per hectare, because we are gonna do the calculation. We have already a rough calculation, but trust me, if I tell you an average 20 euros per hectare, if I need to download the Planet image, we end up with 40 euros per hectare.
Yeah, I understand now. Thank you. And the last one is, at least how many soil subsamples per hectare to measure carbon do you recommend?
Is a recommendation that I cannot tell you, because it's really dependent on the scale of your carbon farming program, the desired accuracy of your initial stock values, and the budget that you have for soil sampling. Because if you have a budget and you've already done your business plan, that you can allocate, I don't know, 1,000 euros or 2,000 euros for sampling, you run the sampling algorithm, you get a samples, so a cost accuracy curve. Of course, the higher are the number of samples, the higher is the accuracy, but also the higher is the cost. So you need to find your project-specific trade-off. Because if your model is accurate enough to estimate carbon removal, you can allocate probably more samples for initialization and lower for verification. But you need to know which is your uncertainty. If you already know which is your modeling uncertainty in terms of parametric uncertainty, and if you know which is your desire or possible sampling uncertainty, you can spend more on taking soil sample at the beginning, without forgetting that at the end you need to take a minimum number of samples for verification. So you need to take into account both the initial sampling accuracy and cost, because if you have all the fields together close in 100 kilometers, you can take more samples per day. But if you have spread over a state, all your thousands of hectares, you need also to take into account really the logistic of sampling. So I cannot give you a number because, again, is a combination of your prediction ability, and you have to know before your modeling uncertainty. And according to this, you can fine-tune to allocate more budget for initialization, also because you need to know at least the potential variability of your soil carbon at the beginning. Because as I showed you before, in our case, we have a range from 30 to 70 tons of carbon. So we need to catch really this variability since the beginning.
Okay, thank you. And the last one, sorry, about the dip of the samples in the soil, was only one dip or one per profile per field?
In our case, is 30 centimeters. We are keeping our auto samplers to go deeper and also to take to account the 30-60 centimeter depth intervals.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I guess one of my questions you already respond, because I was very interested to see if you could get some numbers about the cost efficiency of the whole thing. I guess this is because if I got it right, the figures you show at the end, the 17 units of credit, it was generated through 15 hectares in 3 years, which
Yes.
give us like a 0.3, 0.4 per hectare per year, right?
Yeah.
And like how much that credit should be paid for this amount, for the whole MRV being paid, and also the farmer be sufficiently incentivized to do the practice, right?
That's a good question, Riccardo, because we are doing this simulation. We take this 15 hectare as an example. Of course, it's not a number that can be scalable, okay? But let's imagine that this is already scaled up to 100 hectares. We have to take into account the cost of implementing these practices. First, with or without own machineries, simply because cover crops, in our case, were cultivated under minimum tillage and crop residues were incorporated under minimum tillage. So first question, do you have minimum tillage machineries available? If yes, the cost per hectare of the implementation is lower. First. Second, the cost of MRV, okay, and the co-benefits generated. So we also quantify the co-benefits in terms of input savings, because we also quantify the greenhouse gases emission, because we also manage a bit the fertilization, okay, before the main crops, after the cover crops mainly. And all these costs, if they are taken into account, I would say if the average CO2 price is 35, quite reasonable in the voluntary, let's see in the insetting. I can tell you that on average, without co-benefits, but with the cost of implementation included in the calculation, if we pay 35 euros per ton, we cover easily 90-95% of the implementation cost, without allocating the MRV cost and the cost of certification to the farmer. So I let this cost allocated to the project developer. Okay. As soon as I included in the net incomes for the farmers also the input savings in terms of gasoline, in terms of few irrigation avoided, or few units of nitrogen and phosphorus avoided, we go easily to 200 up to 300 euros per hectare per year, if the inputs costs are accounted economically. And
Okay.
I forgot to mention the cost of man-hour to do the things, because that's something that is never counted. But I make you a simple example. Preparing the seedbed for tomato transplanting means, on average, 1 hour per hectare, including spading, including plowing, including power harrowing, including whatever operation. Adopting the strip tillage techniques for tomato is just 30 minutes per hectare. It's not just a gasoline reduction and saving, but it's also a number of hours. Of course, there we enter on the price per hours of the operators, of the owner of the farm. But of course, this is something that as a carbon farming project developer, I should be able to provide to the farmer, because at the end, the farmer, they don't know how much they can really, you know, assuming that you do not have yield penalties, for sure, because that's...
Yeah, just to clarify, like you said, this 35 euros, I know it's roughly, but this is what should be the money that is entering in the farmer's pocket. So at the end, the price of the credit should be higher than that to pay the other intermediates, the certification fees and the MRV costs.
Definitely. If we do not pay for co-benefits, the price to me for these practices, because I'm talking about the potentiality of these practices in situation where we are really far from the saturation of carbon. Okay, because you saw that we can sequester a lot, and the permanence is also guaranteed, because we also done the simulation of permanence, as is done in Marvik from the agroscope. We also did it. But to me, the price is difficult to say, because we are not for sure working for the voluntary carbon markets in our case, most for the insetting. To me, but that's my first idea, I'm not an agro-food industry, but I would say that the minimum is 50-55 euros per tons of CO2.
Okay.
To be, you know, attractive enough as a starter, you know, for the 5 years.
Okay, and just also another clarification, you use the word co-benefits, but you mean the financial benefits of saving costs, not like a measurement of biodiversity co-benefits or water conservation co-benefits. That's not what you're talking about, right? You're talking about the input savings that the farmer will have as a financial benefit of application of carbon.
Agronomic benefits.
Yeah,
to me,
okay.
the environmental co-benefit, we are too far away.
Far from it, yeah.
To quantify economically and to attribute a real societal values, because I mean, if we want just to create number with qualitative, you know, score or whatever, you know, there are many examples. But honestly, I mean, I'm talking daily with the agro-food industry. They really don't want to, you know, to be the first to pay for a service that are not even quantifiable, you know. It's really tough. I mean, to put a value on biodiversity. If we guarantee that we increase biodiversity, but there are many people that can say which type of biodiversity, above or below.
Yeah. I know. It was just because the word co-benefit is used to that too. So just to make a clarification.
Yeah, but in the CRCF, you know better than me, which is the standard minimum. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. For the sake of time, I mean, I still have one question, but I don't know if anyone else wanted to say something. I mean, my question is about when you were answering Claudia, you used the term desired accuracy.
Yes.
As if that comes from the project developer, but at the end that should come from the VCM. What is the desired accuracy? I know that the methodologies come with the uncertainty, the rules for uncertainty. I was just wondering if the whole dMRV remote seed that you presented us, it seems to me that I like the way you started, because you just showed us that the standard deviation, it's already embedded, and the problem, if you don't have a correct accuracy, we won't be measuring it well. But it seems to me that it's a higher level of what the standards are currently asking as desired accuracy. Just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree, but most of the times we will be adopting low carbon sink practices. And as soon as you just start, you know, 10 10% of the farmers adopt cover crops. The other 10, they rarely incorporate crop residues. The real carbon sequestration potential is very low. Since I know that the farmers, or you pay them 400 euros per hectare to really do all the packages, to adopt all the most carbon sequestering solution. Otherwise, the reality that will be very low adoption of really high carbon sequestration practice. That means that we really need to be accurate a lot, because at the end, technically speaking, there will be no ever farmers that will be adopting organic amendments, no tillage and blah, blah, blah. Only low carbon impact solution. So it means that we need to scale it up to 1,000 of hectares to be really impactful in terms of number of credits to generate. And from our, sensitivity analysis that we are doing, we feel that we need to keep this type of accuracy in a cost-effective way. Of course, we have a target of from 5 to 10 euros per hectare. Let's see in 2 years what we can deliver. Because at the end, this cost is linked very much to the soil sampling. And that's why I come to answer you to the desired accuracy. We need to validate. We are doing in MRV, for example, with Karina. We are structuring an idea how to validate a soil sampling algorithm, a soil sampling, strategy, because we need to prove that the selected points has this desired accuracy. Because if we leave an high accuracy at the beginning, in situation where you go from 30 to 7 tons, when you initialize and spin up your model, you completely fail to fall within the confidence interval at the end. So since the beginning, we need to start very well with the sampling. We can keep some money, let's say, okay, let's not super accurate at the beginning, but trust me, from our simulation, we are gonna start this 1,000 hectares project, and we really run this cost accuracy curve. And we are gonna take 1,000 of sample to test this, this sampling strategy. But our feeling is really, if you do not catch the soil carbon initial variability, and then you do not use a well-calibrated model, most of the times you fall outside the confidence intervals. If you want to be accurate, because if the uncertainty that they want is the 90 confidence intervals test, like the Verra ones, I don't know what the CRCF will say about that, but I don't know. If we really follow the Verra standards, to me, 95% of the carbon farming program in Europe, they are rejected. If we decrease the desired accuracy, the overall project uncertainty, but what it means, if we go to, I don't know, 80% confidence intervals, okay, so we are talking about really, launching numbers, So, I mean, if we want to be credible enough, to me, at least for croplands, at least for the complexity of our systems, because it's not, let's say, an agroforestry or perennial system where you have only one crop. We are talking about 5 crops into rotation and so many diverse options to adopt carbon farming practices, technically speaking, because before cover crops, before tomato, you cannot do too much. If you have other crops in rotation, it complicates a lot, because one farmer can have a net income much higher, much attractable for adopting carbon farming. So he can be the farmer that adopt the most sequestering practices. But as soon as you go in the reality, you see that 90% of the farmers, they do adopt just one practice over 5 years. And if you sum it up, the real contribution to the overall carbon program sequestration, I challenge you to be able to then if we put 0 as standardized baseline, okay, so we open the doors and we can generate numbers, of course.
Yeah, I agree with you, and yeah, it's great that you are pushing it forward. And I mean, we could continue this conversation, particularly because the GRC. I don't know if you could present this things to GRC, how much this can be embedded in the standardized baseline and
I did it.
the upcoming. Yeah, I know you did, but yeah, but I
But-
guess
No, I mean,
okay.
this is really risky because the standardized baseline, at least for our region, can undercredit many farmers.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Andrea. We can continue this conversation probably in Salamanca. It will be really great to see some advancements. And thank you everyone for being here, present in this very interesting series. So yeah, I see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Wishing happy
Thank
new
you.
year,
See you.
happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye bye.